the king. She could see the king, that white-bearded figure upon the high throne. Above him the sun of his house blazoned the wall with dull gold. In the shadow to his right sat a younger man, Prince Barius, upon the throne ochre, bolt upright with a sword across his knees. And the younger man to the king's left must be Prince Septimus, who was to be knighted that evening at the same feast during which she was to be presented. To one side of the thrones stood a small group of bishops, robed and capped with gold, and their tonsured priests. On the other were the chosen officers of the court, a rank of serious faces with gold chains around their necks. There were guards before the dais. Their helms and axes and polished shoulder pieces flickered with reflected torch fire. A baron stood in the aisle, in the last streak of sun before the throne. His black beard and doublet paled in the glare, and the skin of his face was dead white, except for the solid little shadow below the tip of his nose. He was facing full into the light. Surely he could see very little, but every soul in the hall could see him, his heavy brow, his face strong. He must have placed himself deliberately in that ray of sun the moment the trumpets had died. The voice she had heard came from a figure in the gloom beside the baron, a man in a cap and robe who was reading aloud from a scroll. "Didst consort with fell spirits? Didst conspire with rebels? Didst most foully plot violence by magic against us, a baron of the realm? We call on our liege for justice and an end to evil, that thou shalt suffer death under the law of this land." Somebody else was standing in the expanse of gloomy flagstones. It was a woman, alone. Her head was bowed a little, and it seemed to Phaedra that not a face in the crowd changed as the charges poured on over this creature. Their frown ran from the steps of the king to the gates of the hall. Phaedra hadn't known what a witch would look like. If she had expected anything, it was some cackling nightmare, caged like a beast to thrill a fair. She hadn't been prepared for a plain woman, only a few years older than herself. So this was the one on whom the baron wanted revenge. This was the woman who would lie in an unshriven grave, buried headless with a stake through her heart. Phaedra drew another long breath and wondered if her limbs were really trembling in that stifling air. The reading ended. The accused woman was replying, in a voice too low for the watchers to hear. Her speech didn't take long. The space that followed was filled with coughs and the murmur of a crowd shifting its feet. From the shadows, the king spoke. A question. The baron was nodding. The king beckoned. 6 retainers came forward carrying long swords. They laid them in a row on the floor between the baron and the woman, alternating hilt and blade so that 3 pointed each way. A herald bellowed down the hall. "The king yields judgment to the eyes of heaven. Let any that feel the right of this cause come forward before the 3rd trumpet. I say, let them come forward who are ready to prove the truth with their body." The king raised his hand, and a trumpet blew. The watchers jumped. Sudden, shattering. The tongue of the brass was far more powerful than the voices preceding it. At once, 2 knights stepped forward from the crowd. They took their places side by side at the hilts of the swords before the baron. Somewhere in the gallery someone was whispering their names, as if these were well-known fighters. A moment later, the baron himself took a pace forward to stand by the hilt of the 3rd sword on his side. Again he placed his feet carefully, so that the light bathed him from head to toe for everyone to see. Then nothing happened. People whispered to one another on the balcony and down below. No one moved from their place. Phaedra stared down at the woman standing alone with her back to the gallery. Come on. Come on, why did they not blow? Had the herald fallen asleep on his feet? Beyond the hall, the sun had already shifted. A patch of shadow had crawled over the Baron's foot. He hadn't noticed. There was movement in the lower hall. Someone had emerged from the crowd down there and was standing in the empty aisle. He was looking around, looking back, like a little boy who had been told to step up by a parent and had forgotten at once what it was he was supposed to do. Now he had begun to walk up towards the throne. He crossed a shaft of light and appeared as a plain-looking knight in mail. His head was bare, but his face and his device were obscure for long seconds more until he stepped through the last sunbeam and threw his shadow for a moment across the Baron's knees. A heavy, stubbly cheek showed briefly under lank hair. A red hound danced on his surplice. In the gloom before the throne, the man bowed to the king. Then he sidled to his right, and without appearing even to look at the woman behind him, stood at the hilt of a sword on her side. As he did so, the trumpet sounded at last. Now the whispering increased. The change was palpable. Without a champion, the woman would have been a witch. Her sentence would have been passed and done before nightfall. One man had thrown the matter open. Men would die to close it. The dazzle of the light was fading. High above the hall, thin clouds veiled the sun. The contrasts blended into detail that became clearer to the eye. The Baron and his knights were looking woodenly at their opponent. The newcomer wore the gear of a poor manor lord, one of the dog knights of the kingdom, who owned no master but the king, and no follower but some faithful hound. He was looking at his feet, at the throne, to the woman at his back. Perhaps the full implications of what he was doing had only just come to him. The woman, too, was no longer fixed by the row of armed men before her. Her eyes moved from her feet to the crowd, and then up to the gallery. She was slender and wore a simple blue dress. Her long hair shone a deep brown, and was adorned with a few sparse yellow gems. For a moment, Phaedra looked down into a pale, triangular face, with large eyes and a pronounced nose, an expression bewildered and alone. Phaedra saw she was afraid. "They'll kill them both now," muttered a voice in the gallery. "Him, then her." It was like a dream, worse than a dream, for Phaedra felt that in her dreams she was never as helpless as here. She wanted to turn away, leave the hall, and not see how it ended. But she didn't know her way through the dark of the king's house. And, just as in a dream, she could suddenly see her father's face clearly. He stood among the nobles in the opposite aisle. He hadn't looked up. His big, bearded face was frowning at the scene before him. He didn't like what he saw. What could he do? Phaedra felt sure he wanted to do something. He was quick enough to say what he thought was right and wrong at home. Would he tell the king, in front of all these people, that this trial was wrong? Surely not. The king had said that it should take place. Would he come out and be a champion? But then he would have to fight. Fight men who wanted to kill him, one after another, with none of his soldiers to help. She didn't dare think what might happen. Near where Father stood, a young man stepped out from his place and stared down the hall. He must be thinking that if someone else would take up the second sword for the witch, then he would take the third. The third man would fight last, and would have the best chance of surviving. But no one else moved, and the hand of an older knight pulled the young man back. The sibilance of fierce whispers carried across the floor, and Father hadn't moved either. She wanted to look away. Somehow she would find her way down the back corridors and out of this place. Still she didn't move. Neither did the three fighters, the woman, or the man of the dancing hound. Come on, come on, Come on.